The two leading Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, have agreed to hold general elections by the end of 2018. The decision is seen by some as a milestone since the last Palestinian parliamentary polls took place over a decade ago. Well, in a joint statement on Wednesday, the rival factions praised a unity deal signed in Cairo last month, calling it a, quote, realistic start to end divisions. Sceptics, though, warn that similar agreements have stalled in the past at the last hurdle. Well, joining me on today's show, we have from Ramallah, Mohammed Daragme, a Palestinian journalist. We also have Gil Mahili. He's a editor-in-chief at Causa magazine. Ian Black is a journalist for The Guardian and author of Enemies and Neighbours, Arabs and Jews in Palestine and Israel, a book just out this month. Also, I'm joined by satellite from Berlin, Germany, by Yossi Beilin. He's the Israeli negotiator of the 1993 Oslo Accords. Well, the agreement between Fatah and Hamas to hold elections came following 2 days of closed-door talks in Cairo. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas must now set a date for polls. France 24 Salam Chantier has this report.
Another step towards ending a long-running dispute between the two main Palestinian factions. Hamas and Fatah agreed on Wednesday, along with 11 other parties, to hold presidential and legislative elections by the end of 2018. They have asked Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to set a date for the polls after consulting with all sides.
We will have another meeting with all the factions in February. I believe that's when we'll confirm a specific date for the elections.
The Egyptian-sponsored agreement has been a work in progress. The two parties signed a reconciliation accord last month after Hamas agreed to hand over administrative control of Gaza, including the key Rafah border crossing, a decade after seizing the enclave in a civil war. This Saturday, for the first time since 2007, Egypt opened the largely sealed border with Gaza following the agreement. Meanwhile, to discuss further efforts to end the 10-year rift between the two factions, Hamas and Fatah are expected to return to Cairo during the first week of December. Among the remaining bones of contention, the future of Hamas's vast armed wing, which has fought 3 wars with Israel since 2008.
If you just joined us here on the debate, we're talking about an agreement by the two rival Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, who've agreed to hold general elections by the end of 2018. I'm joined by Mohammed Daragme. He's a Palestinian journalist. He's in Ramallah. I'm also joined by Gil Mahili, editor-in-chief at Causa magazine. Good to have you. Ian Black is a journalist for The Guardian and author of Enemies and Neighbours, Arabs and Jews in Palestine and Israel. That's a book just out this month, I understand. By satellite from Berlin, Yossi Beilin is the Israeli negotiator, or was rather, of the 1993 Oslo Accords. Well, Mohammed Daragme, if we start with you, you're in Ramallah. It's essentially where this is playing out. How big a deal is it that the two factions have agreed on holding elections?
Actually, this is not the first time that they agree on holding election. The split has been going on for more than 10 years, during which both parties have agreed several times to hold the election to end the split. But when they go on the ground, they clash again over power. The conflict between Fatah and Hamas is over power. That's why they couldn't conclude an agreement during the 10 years. There is a huge differences between the two factions. The elections the elections that they have agreed on in these talks is connected to what they call enabling or empowering the government in Gaza. And empowering the government means that the government of Ramallah takes over in Gaza, over not only the civil servants, but also over the security apparatus, which was built by Hamas from members of Hamas based on a security discourse that completely different from the discourse in West Bank.
You say this has happened before. Does that mean you're not hopeful? You're not hopeful about the way forward regarding these elections? I mean, will they take place as far as you're concerned?
The most likely these elections are not going to take place. Why? Because they said, yes, we are going to have election by the end of 2018, but that relies on the government takeover in Gaza. But the government takeover in Gaza is very slow, very long process and very painful process, because there is Hamas has built an empire, kind of solid institutions in Gaza during the last 10 years. And now the government of Ramallah wants to take over, and Hamas basically says, I cannot run the government, but I want to keep my power.
Let's bring in someone else, because obviously there are some other views on this. Mr. Daragmi says he doesn't think the elections are going to go ahead, despite the fact that this accord has been signed. Gil Mihali, editor-in-chief at Causa magazine, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I hope he's wrong, but I believe he's right. There's a major political problem in the Palestinian side, is that they have difficulty in producing legitimacy. If you want to create a democratic process, you need to assure that those who lose will respect the decision of the majority. I think that for the solution with Israel, I believe that today it will take the Palestinians make great sacrifices in order to have an agreement with Israel. And I don't believe that the Palestinians, which will be against, will accept a decision by a majority of Palestinians, which I don't sure it exists today, to accept a solution by compromise with Israel. So what's happening now is that it's already difficult to have a peace with Palestine. Now Israel has two Palestines to deal with, and it's part of a bigger problem of the Palestinian society, is to create a body politic capable of adopting a painful, a very painful, difficult compromise solution. The Israeli side has also problems. I'm not blaming only the Palestinians, but since we're talking about them, I think this is one aspect of a major Palestinian problem.
Okay, Ian Black, let's bring you in. What do you think about this? I mean, Mr. Mihali has spoken about, problems on the Palestinian side, thinking essentially in agreement with Mr. Daragmi that these elections are highly unlikely to go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I think it's important to listen to voices on the ground. And Mohammed Daragmi in Ramallah knows, I'm sure, pretty well what the mood is. Elections, of course, are not the only issue. Probably the most significant issue in terms of advancing towards a solution of this most intractable of conflicts is to do with weapons. Hamas, its Arabic name, means the Islamic resistance movement. Its whole raison d'etre since it came into existence has been armed resistance to Israel. And the question of its military capability, which is significant inside Gaza, has not been resolved at all by the steps that have been taken so far in the reconciliation with Fatah.
I mean, you raise a good point, because the armed wing of Hamas wasn't discussed in this declaration. Is that correct?
It's been left to one side, and it's been left to one side because it's such a difficult and central issue. It's certainly one which is of great concern to the Israelis, but it's also of concern to Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority. And he's made clear from the start of this reconciliation process, absolutely unequivocally, that control of Hamas weapons is a central issue which can't be ignored. Now, it's not being tackled at the moment. It's been put to one side. There are strong reasons for all parties to want to make something of this reconciliation on the Palestinian side. But the elephant in the room, as it were, is very much the question.
Hang on, I'm just going to bring in Mr. Mihali. Yeah, you want to react?
Yes, there's a big and a small elephant. The small elephant is that even in Gaza, Hamas doesn't have the monopoly on violence. You have the Islamic Jihad, and I'm not sure that the Hamas, if the Hamas controls its own armed forces, that's for sure. He's not the only one who has armed forces. We have a Lebanon kind of situation in Gaza too.
Yossi Beilin, if I can bring you in, you were an Israeli negotiator of the 1993 Oslo Accords. Where do you see this all going from him? I mean, finally, is it a step in the right direction, or are there still as many stumbling blocks as there have been for a decade now?
In my view, it is a step in the right direction, but the real question is whether it is a realistic step or another just experience another attempt to have elections which will fail. Because from the Israeli peace camp viewpoint, having one Palestinian address is essential, because you cannot really negotiate with 2 or 3 different Palestinian arms. The original idea when I began the Oslo process almost 25 years ago was to talk to the only address on the Palestinian side, which was the PLO. This is not the picture today, regretfully. And if Hamas insists on owning the security in Gaza and the weapons in Gaza, then even if there is election, it will not promote us in any way. And it is quite likely that because of that, there will be no elections.
I mean, in the past, Mr. Beilin, you'd asked President Mahmoud to essentially dissolve the Palestinian Authority. Is that correct? And is that a view that you still hold today?
Well, I said in the past that we had to move from the Palestinian Authority to a permanent agreement by May '99. Since then, it's 18 years have passed, and we have the corridor, we have the interim agreement almost as a permanent one, which is very convenient for some people on the right in Israel, and perhaps also for the Palestinian establishment, which has ministries and prime ministers and president and whatever. And the right thing, in my view, was to dissolve it and to say to the world, we try to have an agreement, there is no agreement, don't deceive yourself that we have a proto-state, we have nothing, and let's begin everything from zero. I regret that it never happened, and the Palestinians stick to the interim agreement as if it was a permanent one.
Mohammed Daragme, what do you think of those comments?
Actually, I disagree here. Why? There is 2 sides of the story. From one side, we have a conflict over power between Fatah and Hamas. It's a pure conflict over power, not a political conflict. It's conflict over power. Who controls, who takes the power, who takes the institutions, and etc. From the other side, Hamas has stepped forward, a long way forward, toward, let me say, a moderate position concerning the peace process. Hamas has changed. Hamas has learned. Hamas, as a movement, political movements are similar to human beings. They grow up. Hamas grew up through 3 wars with Israel. It has realized the limit of its power. Through the political life, Hamas has realized that it agrees to the PLO final goal, which establishing an independent state on the 67 border. Now, Hamas is in a place where they can it can have unity with the Palestinian PLO on the goal of having a state on the 67 border. But unfortunately, in the Israeli side, there is no one offering that solution. This is one. On the other hand, Hamas
let's hold that
now
for, because
offering...
it's an interesting one, Mr. Daragman. I'd like to bring back Ian Black, because you made a comment earlier. I mean, this division between Palestinian factions, as some have called it, one of the largest obstacles to peace talk with Israelis. You said that there are much more obstacles. Talk us through some of them.
Well, look, it's no secret to understand that the peace process, the phrase itself sounds rather antiquated, the peace process is stone dead. Nothing has happened in significant ways, significant talks between Israelis and Palestinians since the spring of 2014, when John Kerry, the US Secretary of State under Barack Obama, basically gave up. There is no peace process. There is absolute stalemate, not even deadlock, because nothing is being discussed. So there are problems on the Palestinian side, certainly to do with the decade-long split between Fatah and Hamas in Gaza. That's certainly an issue, but it's by far from the only one. Israel is ruled today by a government which is not committed in any way whatsoever to the idea of a 2-state solution to the conflict, which most people who have ever looked at that conflict believe is the only way to resolve it. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, is at most committed to what he defines as a state minus. So the problems are on both sides.
OK, I'm going to let Mr. Mihaly respond to what you said there. Israel is not committed to a two-state solution, says one of our guests.
Well, the first remark is about historical cycles. Between the first terrorist attack by Fatah and the Oslo Accords, it was 29 or 30 years. It's 64 to 94. Between the foundation of Hamas and the time that they changed their covenant to acknowledge kind of Israel, it's also 30 years. So it takes 30 years for the Palestinian Party to move from the only solution is to win a war and throw all Jews out of Palestine to a more real political attitude. As for the Israeli side, there is a very, very large consensus in Israel today that a land for peace solution or any kind of a negotiated solution today is impossible with the Palestinians, probably because the withdrawal from Lebanon and the withdrawal from Gaza are considered to be a failure, that Israel withdraws, and on the other side it becomes platforms for launching missiles. It's Hezbollah on the one side, it's Hamas, Jihad Islamic, and small organization in Gaza. So Israel doesn't feel that it's a good deal to compromise because the other side doesn't deliver the goods. Another important...
OK, we're going to hold that there. We'll respond. We're going to take a very short break here on the debate, but we'll be back with more on this debate about the two rival factions in Palestine agreeing to hold elections. Welcome back to the France 24 debate. If you've just joined us, let's bring you up to date. The two leading Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, have agreed to hold general elections by the end of 2018. The decision is seen by some as a milestone since the last Palestinian parliamentary polls took place over a decade ago. While others claim that frictions remain beneath the surface and fear the deal could stall, as similar deals have done in the past. Well, joining me on today's show from Ramallah is Mohammed Daragmi, a Palestinian journalist. Gil Mihaly is editor-in-chief at Causa magazine. Ian Black's a journalist for The Guardian and the author of Enemies and Neighbours, Arabs and Jews in Palestine and Israel. That came out this month. By satellite, I'm joined by Yossi Beilin, Israeli negotiator of the 1993 Oslo Accords. All right, before the break, we were talking about whether a two-state solution is possible or not. You wanted to finish up before we cross over to Yossi Beilin.
Just complete that Israel does believe that there is a real possibility for peace with Palestinians. They don't feel compelled because the power relations is so overwhelmingly on the Israeli side. Israel is strong, Palestinians are divided, the society is crushed, shattered. Arab states, governments, public opinion didn't abandon the Palestinians, but the Arab states abandoned the Palestinians completely. Egyptian government, Saudi government, United Arab Emirates, even half of Lebanon, those who are not Hezbollah, Jordan, they abandoned the Palestinians. The Americans are indifferent or sympathetic.
Let's hold that thought. Let's bring you in, Yossi Beilin. Palestinians abandoned by Arab states?
Well, it is far from being a black and white answer. I mean, in some Arab states are very committed to the Palestinian cause, like Jordan, for example. Others perhaps are less, but the leadership knows exactly that the public opinion in the Arab countries is very committed to the Palestinian issue. And because of that, even if they are cynical or pragmatic or whatever we call it, they cannot turn their back to the Palestinian issue. And even if there is a kind of a common denominator in the Middle East with the Sunnite countries and Israel against Iran, the Arab leadership is telling the Israeli current leadership, we cannot actually have a joint camp with you if you don't solve the Palestinian problem.
Mr.
So the
Beilin,
Palestinian problem is always there on the agenda, even today.
In 2012, you said that the two-state solution is in trouble but not dead. Almost 6 years on, is that still the way that you feel? I'm not sure that you heard that question, so I'll just repeat it.
I'm afraid not.
In 2012, you said, and I quote you, the two-state solution is in trouble, but not dead. 6 years on, or almost, is that the same way that you feel now?
Well, it will not be dead in any situation in the future, because for Israel, the main interest is to have a border between ourselves and the Palestinians. We need to assure a Jewish majority and a democracy. You cannot have a Jewish majority and a democracy if it is a one-state solution. And since the only alternative to the two-state solution is a one-state solution, Israelis cannot agree to something like that. So eventually it is either an agreement about the two-state solution or another unilateral withdrawal, as what Sharon did in 2005 when he left the Gaza Strip. I prefer an agreement, but if there is no other choice, and if Israel will decide, the government of Israel will decide that there is no partner, which I don't think is the right idea, I will then also support a unilateral step rather than keeping the status quo, because if we keep it, there will be an Arab majority, and we cannot have there any possibility of a Jewish democratic state.
Mohammed Daragmi, let's bring you in on that one. We'll talk here about Palestinians having been abandoned by Arab states. Is that the way you see things on the ground where you are?
Actually, yeah, in a way or another, that's true. But true from the perspective that the Arab countries are drowning now in their own problems, in their deep conflict. Saudi Arabia, for example, is drowning in Yemen. Egypt is drowning in Sinai. Syria in Syria. Lots of conflicts through the Arab world. But at the same time, the Palestinians are not relying only on the Arabs. They are relying on the justice of their cause. It's a historical cause, and the Arab population, the Arab and Muslim population, are deeply committed to support the Palestinians. So now these Arab countries are financially committed to support the Palestinian Authority, and they are deeply concerned to put any pressure on the Palestinians to accept any unjust deal. So in the meantime, the Arabs are not playing with the Palestinian team entirely now, but that would leave the BA weak a little bit, but not to the degree to surrender or give up the Palestinian historical and national rights.
Well, let's broaden this debate, because all of this, of course, let's not forget, comes against a backdrop where the US is moving to close the Palestinian diplomatic office in Washington. I mean, Ian Black, that's likely to raise tensions even further.
Well, it certainly won't help. It's a slightly difficult issue to understand, because on the face of it, it's purely a legal requirement. A law passed by Congress requires certification that the PLO has not done things at the International Criminal Court in particular. That certification was not issued recently by the US Secretary of State. Therefore, automatically, the office had to be shut. Now, that decision, on the face of it, is at odds with the efforts being made by the Trump administration to tackle the Israeli-Palestinian issue. The United States has said that it doesn't want the office to close down. So there's a tension there, if you like, between narrow legality and the broad political outlook. The interpretation of it, certainly from the Palestinian point of view, is not a good one. It suggests what many people believe to be the case, that the United States is not an honest broker, not an impartial player in this game. So the timing is unfortunate. The larger question, of course, really is, what is Donald Trump, if anything, going to do to advance this most difficult of issues. Barack
Well, let's
Obama
put that question. Let's put that question
failed
to
to
Gil
do
Mihali.
so.
What do you think about that?
But the American administration.
Moving towards.
I think I'm not sure I understand what is their Middle Eastern strategy, and even if they had a clear one, I'm not sure that President Trump is capable of putting into execution any strategy, whether it is tax cuts or building a wall on the southern border or China commerce or the Middle East. It's not clear what they want, and it's not clear if they are able to put into action what they want. So they are a very ambiguous player for the last 10 months.
And an ambiguous player, is that the way you see things, Mohammed Daragmi?
Actually, the Americans are trying. Yes, that's right. The Americans are trying to bring about what they call the ultimate deal, but they are relying mostly on the Israelis. The American team mostly rely on the Netanyahu's vision. So their approach is based on the Israeli vision on how to solve the conflict. The other hand, they are trying to build a bridge between Israel and the Arabs in facing Iran, and believing that this could use as a pressure tool on the Palestinians, that the Saudis and the Egyptians would pressure the Palestinians to accept a deal. That's not the case here. The Palestinians cannot sacrifice historical Palestine just to face what they call Iranian threat to the Arab countries. President Abbas doesn't want, and he cannot accept any Arab pressure or American pressure. The Americans are using two kinds of pressure. The financial support. America is the biggest donor to the Palestinian Authority. They have closed the office. This is a tool. The other one is bringing the Arab pressure on the PA to accept this minor deal. And the Palestinians cannot accept. They don't want, and they cannot. Even they prefer that the Palestinian Authority collapse under the pressure rather than accepting a minor deal or unjust deal.
Yossi Beilin, we've been speaking about the United States in all of this. Presumably their stance, as people have said on the panel, which is a little bit ambiguous, could complicate efforts for a two-state solution even further.
Well, I agree that it is very, very difficult to read the American strategy right now vis-a-vis the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But the Americans are saying all the time, the administration is saying all the time, wait for December, we will bring you something very interesting. It's difficult for me to believe that it will be just a copy of the Israeli government view about the solution, which cannot be accepted by the Palestinians. And they will have to suggest a compromise. Let us see what this compromise is. I have no clue about it yet, and there is no question that if parallel to these efforts to suggest something new, the biggest deal and whatever, you close down the Palestinian office in Washington, you are shooting in your own leg. It is true that it is part of a legal process in the United States, but nobody can really understand it. I mean, a real president should have said, okay, kids, now don't close down this office. I'm bringing a plan to the parties, and let us see what will happen. And if it doesn't happen, of course, it is a big, big, big weakness on the American side.
In all of this, Ian Black, if we come back to you, the UN has said despite the challenges, the reconciliation efforts, must not be allowed to fail. Realistic or a little too optimistic?
Well, I think the UN has an important role to play in this. You know, it's worth remembering a few basics. 2 million people live in Gaza. It's one of the most densely populated places on the planet. Life is extremely difficult. It's been under blockade for a long time. Life is very harsh indeed. And the UN is rightly putting the focus on the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. And it is true that even with the limited moves made so far in the reconciliation process, it has brought some improvement in terms of the control of the borders, in terms of access from Egypt, in terms of the possibility of movement of goods and people to some extent. It has brought about an improvement. At the end of the day, obviously, it's about high politics and diplomacy and the future of that very important thing, the peace process. But it's about ordinary people. And the UN is correct to talk about that aspect of it. It's also been the scene of 3 wars in the last, how many years? Since 2006. In 11 years, there have been 3 destructive wars. So we mustn't lose sight of that. But the question is, can the improvement in humanitarian conditions also become something that changes the political contours of this extremely intractable conflict? So I think that it is reasonable to hope for changes on the living conditions in Gaza and life for ordinary people, and to be skeptical about whether it can be translated into something more far-reaching in terms of advancing the peace process.
Do you want to react to that?
I would like to add that there's a very interesting interview published by Haaretz a few weeks ago with an Israeli psychologist who visits regularly Gaza, and he was astonished to discover that his last visit that the Gaza society is completely shattered. He estimates the number of sexually abused children between 5 and 12 years to be 30%. He saw violence. Where there was resilience and solidarity, he sees hatred and violence within the Palestinian society. He said he never saw anything like that, and he said that he's afraid it might be too late to save quite a few generations of Gaza today. They are cracking under the pressure.
Mohammed, let me respond to you, because you're obviously on the ground. Gaza society too broken to be fixed, or are you hopeful?
Yes, the problem in Gaza, Gaza is under siege, not only Israeli siege, but also Egyptian siege, and the Palestinian Authority is putting pressure and restrictions on Gaza. I go to Gaza very often, and that's right. The Gaza society is under huge pressure, and that's why Hamas, new leadership in Gaza, came up with a new approach. They want the Palestinian Authority to come back to rule Gaza and to open Gaza to the outside world. And of course, the pressure creates psychological problems, and Gaza is not only suffering from the pressure, but also from the scarce resources. Gaza has no water, no electricity, no land, and all of that is a huge pressure on people who cannot travel, cannot do any activity. They don't have real life. So of course the results are dangerous and huge. But at the same time, you know, this expresses itself on many directions. One of them, people would go to the extreme. They would go to the jihadi style. Others would go different direction.
I'm going to bring in Ian Black on this, because I know that,
Mr.
Black, I know that a book that you've written does explore everyday life. And since we're talking about everyday life, your book looks at Ramallah, Haifa, Gaza as well. What are your thoughts on this?
You know, the United Nations has said that Gaza will be uninhabitable within a few years. I mean, it's as stark as that. It is a huge problem. People's lives are miserable. All the things that have been described are absolutely true. They're documented by the UN, by NGOs. These are people who are themselves, it has to be remembered, the vast majority of the population of Gaza are there are not many original refugees left anymore, but they're certainly largely the descendants of refugees from 1948. It encapsulates in a very, very vivid and painful way the dilemma of the Palestinian people. Gaza, even if peace were to break out tomorrow, would still remain an extremely difficult place. The conditions, the physical conditions, the constricted space, the generation that has never been out. I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of young people in Gaza who have never left the territory. It's worth saying how big it is. It's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 4 miles wide and 20 miles long. It is a narrow strip of land bordered on the sea by one side and desert and heavily controlled Israeli border
Yossi
and a
Beilin.
small Egyptian one on the other.
Yossi
It's a very,
Beilin.
very grim place.
Okay, Yossi Beilin, let's bring you on this. You're an Israeli negotiator for the 1993 Oslo Accords. Were mistakes made? I mean, looking back so many years on, what could have been done differently to perhaps move this debate forward?
Well, I believe that the biggest mistake of all of us was not to go directly to a permanent agreement in '93. In '93, we had a Palestinian leadership which was united. It was led by a very charismatic leader, Yasser Arafat, who changed his mind and after 30 years, as it was said before, decided to strike a deal. We had an Israeli prime minister who eventually was ready to sacrifice his life in order to make peace with the Palestinians. We had a new American president, President Clinton, who was eager to do something on the international arena and to go then for an interim agreement, by the way, as a result of the wish of the two sides, because I tried to convince both sides to go then for a permanent agreement, and they felt that it was premature. I think that we lost many years because we were not courageous enough to get the real deal then. I hope that it will be done in the near future, even by the current American administration.
The Oslo Accord has stalled because neither side was courageous enough?
I think Yossi Beilin is better placed than I am to make this judgment. I feel that both Israeli society and Palestinian society have very, very important difficulties in digesting the huge sacrifice needed in order to reach a peace between the two countries. And I can understand that the Israeli leadership in 92, 93 felt that it is too much to ask of the Israeli public. So maybe we can say retrospectively we should have, but I'm not sure that the alternative would be peace, but it could have been even worse. If you try to force something that a public opinion is incapable of digesting, it could be worse. It could be even worse.
Things could be worse, Mahara Daragme, excuse me.
Yes, of course. Of course, the Palestinians, the Palestinian population is growing, and the land is being limited. The Israel every day. New housing units are being built on Palestinian land in West Bank. Every day, the land of the territory of the Palestinians is being shrunk by the expansion of settlements and settlers, and the consequences of that is a huge pressure, economical, political, social, daily life. Daily life in the Palestinian territories is a hell. People cannot move freely, cannot invest, cannot build, and the land is being diminished and very expensive. So, of course, that is not the end of the story. The pressure would lead to results, and the results, of course, would be expected in explosions, in confrontation, violent confrontations. Now we have President Abbas. He is moderate and he is willing to reach a deal on the 67 border. Hamas is willing to join the club. Hamas has made significant changes in its discourse and in its political program. They are willing to accept the 67 border. The factions in Gaza realize that the open war with Israel would result in a catastrophe. So it's true that they have small armies, but they are not willing to fight. They are keeping that for their own reasons. So from the Palestinian side, I see the Palestinians are united behind the idea of the 67 border. But unfortunately, on the Israeli side, we see a different picture. The right wing is growing
So in terms
left
of
has gone.
In terms of our initial question about whether these parties coming together are deciding that they're going to call elections, is the general consensus is that this isn't a huge issue because it's happened before and people have been disappointed in the past? I mean, that question to the panel.
Yeah, that's right, Palestine.
You can go ahead and answer.
Yes, the Palestinians are not enthusiastic about this declaration from Cairo. They know that Cairo brought the factions for its own reason, for the interest of Egypt, and they came up with this declaration under the pressure. They came up with similar declarations in Cairo previously, in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, in Doha. But these declarations went nowhere due to the sticking points, the major sticking points between the two parties. So yes, people did not go to the street to celebrate because they know they have seen this movie before and
seen this movie before. Yossi Beilin, you started off saying that this was reasonably positive.
Well, of course, I mean, I think that all of us would like to see one Palestinian address, but if the issue of the weapons is not solved, and if you are having a phenomenon of kind of Hezbollah on the Palestinian side, President Abbas himself said that he cannot accept something like that and that there will be no reconciliation if Hamas and other fractions are keeping their own weapons. And this is the biggest challenge that the Palestinians are having right now. The issue is not just fixing a date for elections, but deciding that there is one weapon, and this will not be very easy.
OK, we're going to leave it there. That brings us to the end of our debate. Mohammed Daraghi, you're a Palestinian journalist. Thank you for your time today. Gil Mihali, editor-in-chief at the Causa magazine. Ian Black, an author and journalist. And, of course, Yossi Beilin, Israeli negotiator for the 1993 Oslo Accords. Thanks for your time. That brings us to the end of our debate, We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned to France 24.